Ready to go.
Okay.
Miss Katie Cummings,
Hi.
one of my favorite of all times. One
Thank
of
you.
my favorite of all times. My goodness gracious. Uh, so you're leaving here. It's the
Yes.
eighth grade.
Yes.
Pick it up and take us
Okay.
on your journey.
So I knew I was going to go to a boarding school in the Northeast because my sister and brother had, and that seemed to just be the path that was chosen.
Give me their names real quickly, honey.
Laurel is my oldest sister, and then Teddy is my older brother.
That's right, Laura and Teddy.
Yes.
Okay.
And they both went to Lawrenceville in New Jersey. So that's kind of where I was leaning. But I remember really vividly that I was so excited and it never crossed my mind not to go. And you said once, like, and you're off to boarding school? And I was like, yep. And you kind of paused and you thought, yeah, I think you're ready for that. But it had never crossed my mind. Like, I had never even thought. I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Maybe I should think about if I even am ready to go. Ultimately decided I was, but that was the first time I'd even thought about it. So I went to high school in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Liked it a lot, loved the English classes, had an awful time with the math classes. That's pretty much my MO. And I went to Spain for my junior year of high school because I got a little stir crazy and just figured, why not? So they had school year abroad offered. So you go and you live basically in Spain for a school for Americans for like 13 or 14 American kids. So I went there and my writing probably really suffered. I definitely wasn't a very good writer in Spanish. That's definitely for sure. And then went back to Lawrenceville, graduated. I went to Boston College, where I was an English major with a concentration in creative writing. And I, again, was a little stir crazy. And so I overloaded my courses junior year to graduate a year early because I just was ready to go.
3 years. You graduated in 3 years from Boston College. Okay.
Yes, yeah. A lot of reading, a lot of writing. If I could do it again, maybe I'd be a history major because it was seriously a lot of reading and writing. But I did it. It's done. So I graduated and I came to New York City. And I knew I wanted to write. I didn't know in what capacity. So I had a couple of like little internships, little jobs. One at a magazine that did like current events. One at a financial magazine that was really not a good fit. But mostly I think I realized that journalism wasn't exactly what I wanted to be doing because it's creative, but it's not really storytelling. If you make up too much, you get in trouble. So I didn't want to do that. So I ultimately decided I wanted to do some screenwriting. So I did a couple like web series and short films, and then they weren't very good or they were missing something. And my best friend from Palm Beach Day School, Delaney Buffett, was basically doing the same thing. And we're still best friends. We probably talk 5 hours a day. So
name again?
Delaney Buffett.
Delaney Buffett.
Yes.
There's another name I wanted Barb to interview.
Oh yeah, she'd be great. And we were always at Palm Beach Day School, like really competitive, but in a healthy way, I think. And now we actually work together. So we started a production company together and we write scripts together. So we started with something small, just with a show online, like a web series, just to see if we could do it and if we liked working together. And we decided we did. So we did longer form things, some television scripts, some movie scripts, and a short documentary that Delaney directed that did probably as well as a short documentary can do. So we've been working and getting a little more traction. It's very difficult, but it's definitely really, really fun. So I think last you guys saw me, I was writing and hanging out with Delaney, and that is still exactly what I'm doing.
Now, you still with her and you have this production company?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you've had that for how long? How many years now?
I think officially we have founded it maybe like 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Like we really actually made it into a company, but before that we were just doing it in an unofficial capacity.
And you are centralized in New York.
I'm in New York, she's in Los Angeles.
She's in Los Angeles.
Technically we're bi-coastal.
I see, I see. So what, do you have any projects in the wings now, waiting for fruition?
Yes. So right now, so we wrote a show that was purchased by Pop TV, which is a subsidiary of CBS, Viacom CBS. And we have a movie that we wrote for a company that distributes movies through Netflix. So we were really excited about them. However, COVID hit, and as is the way of the new world, everything's on pause for right now.
You're right.
But I'm still optimistic.
Okay, now let me ask you this question. Are you working on a book of your own, a fiction? Or have you done any before? Have you started? Have you thought about it?
I've always thought about it. It
Okay.
like haunts me. I think about it like probably every day. I don't know that it would ever truly be pure fiction. I think I would want to do something more in a creative nonfiction space. Those are the courses.
When you say creative, all writing is creative. All writing is creative. My wife, when she would make out a list for Publix, is the most creative thing you would ever see. I would be able to follow it, and each thing I'd pick up and it would be exactly in its place. So everything is creative. Usually when people say creative, they mean fiction. That's what mostly when they say, oh, they mean fiction. But all writing is creative. You know that yourself. When you're writing, when you're angry about something and you put it down on paper, that's very creative. I can't think of anything more creative.
Yeah.
I've done it. So have you started? Did you ever start anything?
Yes, I've started. Well, I'll usually start in my mind, like really mapping it out. And this almost always happens when I'm falling asleep or getting ready to go to bed. And then all of a sudden I just am like hit with this idea and I'm up and I'm outlining it. But I always get overwhelmed from my own outline for the entire book. And I'm just thinking like, well, maybe I should start there. Maybe I should start at a chapter and just see what happens. So that's why I get intimidated by just pure fiction. So I've done a lot more like, I guess, creative essays, I guess I would call them, because they are kind of independent of one another. But I don't like, if I were to publish a book, I would really want it to be like a true novel, not necessarily just collected essays. So I end up writing a lot of things that could maybe be looped together, maybe not, but it's been a dream of mine definitely to write just a true novel.
Mm-hmm. Have you had any ideas? I'm sure when you're thinking in bed and you're thinking of all these things, I hope you have a pencil and paper next to you on your nightstand where you can jot down these things.
I do. And I have a lot. I mean, it always I would want a female protagonist because I think I would probably be better at writing a female protagonist than a male protagonist. And I always want it to be some element of looking back, of kind of parsing out your childhood or where you came from or whatever it was, and into how it shaped you into today. But because that's what I'm drawn to, I get intimidated because I'm only 29. So I don't have that much to look back on. I mean, I have stuff. I definitely have stuff, but I'm sure it would only get better the more I waited. But I know that's also just something I'm telling myself because I'm procrastinating. So I waver between the two.
Well, all I can tell you is, I've had many students, they say they're interested in writing. And what's my advice? And the only advice I've ever given them is two things. If you go to college, stay away from English departments. You'll hear some of the worst in things there. And the second thing I have to tell you is, You have to write.
I know.
You have to write.
I
No
know.
matter how, you can't make an excuse. You have to put words on paper. And if you do it every day, even if it's only a couple sentences, but you have to write, because that's part of that's part of the whole inner thing coming out. You have to do it, and no excuses.
Well, I definitely write 5 days a week.
Okay.
But in terms of working on my own independent book, I get a little shy.
Okay, well, that's okay. You're working.
Yeah, but I'm
like
working.
2 jobs. That's like doing 2 jobs. Okay. So that's where we are now.
That's where we are now. I spend a lot of time between California and New York. Still best friends with Delaney. Still writing. And Laurel and Teddy were really jealous that you wanted to speak to me instead. So nothing's changed.
Well, how are they doing, honey?
They're doing well. Teddy works in finance, but he has read maybe every book ever published, the good ones, the bad ones. He's an absolutely voracious reader. And Laurel writes for an advertising firm, but she just finished her first novel and it's off with a publisher for notes. So we'll see what happens.
Wonderful. And how's your dad?
Dad's doing well. He is in Virginia right now. And then my mom's still in Florida.
She's still in Florida. They're both well. The COVID and good.
Everything's so far, everything's good. So we're very lucky in that respect.
Okay. Let's see okay, let's go back and let's do some reminiscing.
Okay.
Let's go back to, by the way, honey, maybe it's a little too early. You're only 29. You're just a baby. But you have a treasure trove of material here.
I know. I would love to see it. I would love to see it.
Oh, you got a treasure trove from so many angles. Oh my goodness.
I'm worried I'll read them and be like, I hope I like it. I hope I read it and I like it.
What's that?
Like the educational autobiography or something. Like I hope that I would read it and remember what I was talking about and think it was funny. No, I don't have it. You
don't have it? Did you have your folder?
Oh, my folder's in Florida with my mom, so it's not with me, but
okay. So it would be in your folder.
Yeah.
It would be in your folder. Okay, let's go back. Were you a lifer here?
No, I left 8th grade, but I started in kindergarten. So almost.
So you were a lifer like that. Okay, so here we are, Palm Beach Day School 10. You're in 1st grade. Who was your 1st grade teacher? You remember?
Mrs. Carnes.
Who?
Mrs. Carnes.
Mrs. Carnes.
I think her first name was Terry.
Oh, Terry, yeah.
Yeah.
Honey, I've been here since 1968. So names and people, you have to understand, they get clouded in there, and in my Alzheimer's, you know what I mean? Yeah, Terry Carnes, knew her, a wonderful lady. So that was your first. Now let's go back this way. Who was in your class? Give me some of your class.
Oh, okay. Well, Delaney Buffett. I had Christian Rodriguez. So I know you must remember Christian Rodriguez.
Oh yeah.
He went to Lawrenceville and he went to Boston College.
I'll be darned.
He was with me. We were together the whole time. And he's hilarious and so smart. I had Will Shuttleworth. I had Caitlin Allward. I had Maggie Jameson.
The Elwards. I remember the Elwards. I remember both Caitlin, and she had a younger sister or older sister?
She had an older sister, Casey.
Casey was the older sister. That's right.
Then Maggie Jameson and Paige Newquist. We were always nipping at each other's heels for grades in your class. That was like seriously competitive.
Yeah, there was, as I recall that class, as you're mentioning names, I remember there seemed to be a little drama going on there at times.
Hopefully drama for English grades is kind of as like dorky as you can get, and that's what you'd want. It's kind of where I stayed. Who else did we have? Andrew Levin. Alex Rattinger, and she had 2 older sisters.
Their father's my doctor.
Oh yeah, he was my dad's doctor too.
My doctor, yes. I had him. He was a student of mine when I taught at the public school.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes. Before I came here, I taught there for 5 years, and I had Mark there. Okay, so who else? Anyone else?
I mean, there's so many. I'm trying to think of who was in the English class. Oh, Paige Bellissimo.
Who?
Paige Bellissimo.
Yes. Okay, I remember. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I must be forgetting people. I'm thinking of, Willie Meyer.
Willie Meyer, yes.
I'm thinking of the public speaking class.
Yeah.
And just like, I remember.
You remember your 10-minute final?
What I did the final on?
Yeah, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. I did it on, I sound like a freak, but I did it on well-known serial killers, I think was one of them.
Well-known what?
Serial killers.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that.
You need a subject to really grab the audience's attention. So yeah. I really went with it.
What was your time? Do you remember your time? 10 minutes. As I recall, you were pretty close to 10.
I think it was pretty close. I remember being pretty pleased. Yeah.
Yes.
But I practiced. I remember my nervous tick was to pull up the hem of my skirt. And you're like, you really got to stop. Like you're going to like really get yourself in trouble one day. So I was able to cut that. But one thing I remember from the speech class was Christian Rodriguez. It was the daily 1 minutes that we, would practice every week. And he forgot to write one. So he came in and he said, the following is my 1 minute speech. 1, 2. And he counted basically to 55 and had a perfect minute score. And you took like 30 seconds to look at him and you said, I'll pass you, but never do that again. But I thought it was pretty smart.
Yes, but the speech unit, the kids who have come back, hundreds of them, many of them said, well, to me, that was the most valuable thing that I did, because so many of our students, honey, in their jobs, their professions, they're speaking, speaking publicly. Remember, as I always tell the people, that survey they did how many years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, that they asked a huge amount of people from all walks of life, what do you fear most in life? Number 1 was public speaking. Number 2 was death. Public speaking came first.
That was definitely, I think, the most helpful. Even just figuring out how to organize the speech, how to kind of structure it so it makes sense.
Right.
I thought very valuable.
Right. Do you remember memorizing your Julius Caesar?
Yes, and I knew you'd ask about that, and it was really difficult. It was so much. It was so much.
And
it was
times of Cyrano de Bergerac too. Remember that?
Did I do Cyrano de Bergerac?
Yes, you did both.
I blocked that one out of my memory. And I remember we had the girls read Jane Eyre for the coming of age novel, and the boys read Catcher in the Rye.
Catcher in the Rye.
And I was so jealous because I thought Jane Eyre was so boring. And I was reading the parts of Catcher in the Rye. I was like, oh, come on, this is way better. Like, how can we switch? But I'm happy to have read both.
A few years after that, some of the girls came to me and said, it's not fair.
It's not fair. Jane Eyre was so boring.
I know. So I said, well, okay. So I gave them the choice. If you wanted to read Jane Eyre, okay. If not, you could do Catcher in the Rye. And I gave the boys the same choice, of course, Catcher in the Rye or Jane Eyre.
The numbers slowly start to go down. No, I'm joking. I'm happy, of course, to have read both. And I would rather read Jane Eyre in class to have someone help me through it, where Catcher in the Rye is a little more.
Do you remember The Count of Monte Cristo?
Love The Count of Monte Cristo. That was probably my favorite thing we read.
So many people tell me that that's my favorite book. And I'll ask so many of them, which was your favorite part? And you'd be surprised. I don't know if this says something about human nature, but I find myself remembering back after I had read it in high school, and it was my favorite part. When he found the treasure. I don't know what that says about human nature, but when he found that money,
yeah, put the bookmark right there. loved that one. I loved that, and I loved Great Expectations.
Great Expectations, right? That's still one of my favorites. It was before well, of course, you're too young, but as I said, English departments. When I was in college, Dickens was in low esteem in many of the college English departments. He was in low esteem there. And then eventually that passed and he became again. But that's what I say, there's people in the English departments, they don't, most of them. What do they know? What do they know?
Well, I remember vividly at Boston College, I was an English major, and then I was in the concentration, basically a creative writing minor, which was a really small, like 30-person group. And I went to go see I think he was the head of the department or something like that. And I said, I want to graduate a year early. So what should I do? How do I organize the classes? And he just said, oh, that's not happening. Like, oh, no one's ever done that. Like, no, like, and partly maybe they hadn't done it and partly they didn't allow it. So he just kind of completely dismissed it. And I just didn't think, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. And just went and found someone else to talk to. But it was definitely an English department kind of like snobbery.
Let's see, what else, hon? You have any questions or anything about this?
Oh, I wanted to say, let me think. I have some questions. I also wanted to say that my second grade teacher, Mrs. Calhoun.
Mrs. Calhoun.
She was, I remember, so we had a vocabulary like we had with you, but for second graders, and you would put the words into sentences. And I had so much fun doing that, just cracking up. I'd make them with my grandmother. And I think that kind of like ignited the fun for when I was in middle school and eventually upper school. But I remember it really fondly.
Yeah. She retired how long ago did she retire, Barb Calhoun? About 5 years, 10 years ago? 6 years ago? Okay. Yes.
She was really great.
Yes.
Loved cats. I won't forget that. My favorite, let me see, question for you. I'm sure, I mean, it's going to be such a simple question because I'm sure you get this all the time where it's like a student misbehaving in a way that stood out or something that really shocked you, because I know when you teach, like you just had such complete control over the classroom. And I don't want to say you ruled with like fear, because that's not totally fair. Like everyone, obviously we're adored, but you wanted to do a good job. You didn't want to get in trouble. So I guess the question would be, was there ever something with a student that just caught you totally off guard and not you lost control of the classroom, but you truly were speechless?
Yes. I can remember one especially where a boy giving a speech. I'm trying to think who it was. You mentioned the name of the kid that went to Boston College with you.
Christian Rodriguez?
Could have been he. I'm not sure or not, honey. But he wanted to shock the audience.
Oh, God.
So he's giving his speech and he uses the F word, just throws it out. And, and I didn't react. I just let him finish the speech. And then we had a little discussion. So it must not have been he, though. You would have remembered it, I'm sure.
You think, but with him, I might have been desensitized at a certain point with that many classes with him. And then my other question is, do you have a favorite teacher that you ever had? English teacher, or I guess teacher in any subject?
One of the favorite teachers I ever had. Who was the most favorite teacher I ever had? It was in 6th grade, Mr. Greg. He had come from a private school. He had taught at one of the elite private schools. I had no idea what he was doing in our high school in a steel town with all that, that was such a conglomeration, different ethnic groups and but he's the one that told me I was a good reader. I loved to read. I was a good reader. And he's the one who told me they had assigned the book through the department. And he got me, he said, come here. He says, try this book. I said, what do you mean? He said, just try it. See how you like it. you're going to find parts of it very difficult to read. Don't worry about that. Just see what you did. So I did it. Great Expectations. That was the book. And he was constantly giving me books like that. And that's why to this day I have a tendency to like English literature there, that whole period, etc., 17th, 18th century. I don't know what it is. One of my favorite books of all time is The Way of All Flesh by Samuel Butler. He only wrote one book. Ask your brother about that. See if he's read that. One book. Of course, that book helped to destroy the Church of England in its effect on the. But anyway, honey. But he did. He would give me these books and say, "Try this." You know, he'd always say, "You're not going to understand all of it," but he said, "It's not that important that you understand everything." And I'm sure that went counter to what a lot of reading psychologists say. Oh, you can't give the kids something if they don't understand it, you're going to turn them off. I know that they haven't. You remember the articles you did in class?
Vividly.
Atlantic, Monthly, and you remember those were difficult. And I didn't expect you to get everything out of it, but you got something out of it. And you built a little more and a little more. And that's how it happens. I could be wrong. I don't think so, though.
I think you're right. I remember I was thinking in preparation for the call about the articles, and there was the hardest one, at least for me. I remember I think I sat up all night, like reading it and reading it and reading it. And it was about, I believe it was about folklore from different cultures. And it started talking about the rainforest, and they had sugar cubes the size of X, Y, and Z. And they had these ants that could carry raindrops, and all of these things, and how the stories just change from person to person, and, you know, how storytelling can shape a culture. And I just was so confused the first couple times I read it, to the point where I remember it now. I'm almost 30, and I remember being like, I could not crack this article, but eventually got it, and I'm still proud that I did it. Yeah, it was the first, you'd read an article and then you'd do 500 words summarizing it, and then 500 words with an opinion.
Right. The first paragraph, just the main ideas. I just want main ideas. And so you're the author, just stating main ideas. And that was for reading comprehension, of course. Second paragraph, that's the long one. I want to see, what are you thinking about this? You could agree, you could disagree, you could add anything. Up to you. You remember I told you people, and some have asked me about this. Would I do it? That no one would read your papers without your permission. I always tell all my kids that no one, and I have had some run-ins with some people, teachers, administrators, etc. Said, I'd like to see this. I said, get their permission. Otherwise, two exceptions. If I read something where I feel there's a danger to that student or someone else, I have to say something. I will. Or if they get a court order, I'm not going to jail for you. I'll give them.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah. But most of the time, the kids, I'll ask kids, do I have your permission to read this to the class? Yes, because they want it. Usually it's good writing. They want their writing read.
Oh, of course. Please, I'll stand up.
That's right.
And then I had another question. How did you think to eat people's quizzes, bad quizzes, or wrinkly papers? And what was the first time you did it? Was it planned? Was it impromptu?
I think the first time
Were you hungry?
I'm trying to think. I think the first time I did it, honey, was at the Palm Beach public school. Because I taught there for 4 years before I moved here. And I had a student who was a good writer. But he was rushed through everything, sloppy, etc. Wouldn't take any pains to rewrite something, would never do it. And I had been telling him, you can't That's the first draft. I said, now the work starts. Now the work starts. You have, no, no, no. So he handed a paper to me one day, and it was really, I mean, the content was excellent, but the writing was just so many mistakes and this or that. And I don't know why, but he said, what do you think? Oh, I took a big chunk. I had about 5 calls that night from parents. Did you really eat that boy's paper? I said, I didn't digest it. I just took a nice chunk out of it and chewed it up a little bit to show my disdain for it.
I'm sure he didn't forget it either.
I don't think so. I don't think so, honey. You know, I had a teacher in high school, Mr. Britton, brilliant man. And I was guilty many times. I was a good writer. And I'd slop through it real quick, get rid of out of the way. So one day in class, he's going over the papers from the night before. And he comes to my paper, he pulls it out, and he handled it as though it's a piece of you know what. He's holding it there. And I'm sitting there, and Vivian, and this is 1950, honey. I'm a senior, and I can remember this. Vivian Lawrence, beautiful blonde, sitting on my left, and Eileen Matthews is sitting on my right. Both young ladies whom I lusted after, and they're sitting there. He says, Greco, and he had a lisp. And he drank. I know he had a bottle in his dress. He was brilliant, though. I mean, he really was. Mr. Britton. He said, I'll never forget this. And it's akin to chewing paper, honey, the effect it had on me. He said, Greco. And as soon as I heard that tone, I started sliding down in my seat. He said, some people are born stupid. And he paused. He said, other people have stupidity thrust upon them. Now I'm trying to get under the desk because, and he says, and still others like you dash hither and thither, chasing after stupidity. You, sir, qualify on all 3 counts. And that's, I mean, honey, I never handed a paper into him that I hadn't rewritten 3 or 4 times. Yeah.
That is a crashing lady you read about. That is so.
I can still, and with that lisp especially, hither and thither. Mr. Britton, one of my favorite teachers. He was one of my
He's one of your favorites?
Oh, yeah, he was brilliant. And he liked me too. And he'd tell me, he said, bring me in, and he'd give me some, things that we hadn't had in class that was a little too on writing techniques, things like that. And I remember he was the first guy that said, hey, he says, remember, you can start a sentence with and or but. Don't overuse it, but it can be very effective. And then he'd give me some examples like, and then there were none. Mm-hmm. The topic of what he calls and things like that. But the little thing that he'd give him, because he liked me and he knew I was a good writer and he knew I liked to write, but he was going to take care of that flaw. And boy, did he do it. Yeah, sure. I can remember it as though it was yesterday.
Wow.
Mr. Britton.
Yeah, that's not something I would soon forget either.
What's that?
That's not something I would soon forget either.
No. Sometimes, although I'm sure psychologists would disagree with me, but sometimes it takes things like that to make an impression. Mm-hmm. Every now and then. I'm not in favor of humiliating people and etc. But there are some times when a lesson, it's the only way, as they say in psychology, you have to give some negative reinforcement there. Mm-hmm. Make them, so I don't know.
I mean, I think whatever theory you have on teaching, you're obviously right on the money. Your
What's that?
students are completely devoted, and I can really say that my time in your class, I mean, it was grade school, but shaped, I mean, the rest of my life. It made me a confident writer with great grammar and punctuation. And I knew I wanted to do something in the writing space, and I am, and my entire family still talk about you all the time.
How's your brother? He came
Lawrence?
a couple of years.
Lawrence? Yep,
Who?
he's doing really well. His name's Lawrence. And
Lawrence, that's right. And
he's in the city. He's in New York as well. He went to Trinity, and he now has a job selling art. It's a first job out of college, but he's a very good salesman.
Good, good. Yes, yes. But yes, your brother, your older brother and sister, they were, I don't know if either of them won the prize.
They didn't.
They didn't. No, I recall that at the luncheon after graduation, I was teasing them about it. Yeah, you didn't win it, she did.
We still tease them about it, so
Oh,
you can tell it's the highlight of my life if I'm still teasing them about it, but I am.
Well, listen, how about your personal life? Is there any significant other anywhere in sight or anything?
There's a significant other lurking in the other room, listening to half of the call. I have a boyfriend that also went to Boston College, and we live together in New York. And
what's he do?
He works in tech, so I understand none of it. He's like, something with computers. Yeah.
The reason I can do this is Mrs. Close organizes everything. She's a genius.
I'm sitting at his desk, so that's the reason I could do this. So I stick to what I know, and he sticks to what he knows. But sometimes I'll proofread emails for him, so he can thank you also.
Okay. So, well, honey, this has been so nice. And as I said, I've always been wondered, she had to have come in town sometime.
I did. I really did. And you were torn in the room. And once I missed you, I was so close. And someone said, I just missed you.
Okay. But the next time,
I'll call.
Make time. Call me in day ahead. I'll be in town. We'll go to dinner or lunch at least if you can't go to dinner. Okay.
It was so nice to see you, Mr. Greco.
Oh, it's so wonderful.